But as these trips produce broad agreements without dollar values attached, what have they really done to secure Canada's trade?
We'll have our elbows up, we're going to drop our gloves when someone challenges us. But every single decision that Prime Minister Carney has made since the campaign has been completely the opposite. He has given many concessions to the Americans, yet it is unclear whether we've gotten anything in return.
Usually describe these meetings as productive. There was a new way to describe it yesterday. They called it, they're leaving Washington with prudent optimism about where things are at with the Americans.
Hey Siri, find a parallel word for progress.
Mark Carney came into office promising to fight hard for Canada. His phrase was memorable. Canada would keep its elbows up, ready to push back against Donald Trump's tariffs. But only months later, the story looks very different. Instead of clashes, we've seen concessions. Tariffs lifted, a digital tax delayed, and countermeasures scaled back. That raises a critical question. Is Carney already breaking his word, or is this a deliberate strategy to protect Canada in a tough moment? Carney's tough campaign talk struck a chord with voters. Many Canadians wanted a leader who would not bow to Washington. Yet since taking office, his approach has shifted. Instead of matching Trump tariff for tariff, Carney has taken a softer line. He ended some Canadian counter-tariffs, chose not to fully mirror U.S. measures on steel and aluminum, and postponed the digital services tax. Conservatives say this proves he overpromised and underdelivered. But there's another side to the story. Matching every U.S. tariff would mean higher costs for Canadian families, from cars to building materials. Canada's economy is far smaller than America's. A prolonged trade war would likely hurt Canada more. From that perspective, pulling back isn't weakness. It's a calculated choice to keep negotiations alive. While dialing down the fight with Washington, Carney has turned outward. His recent tours through Europe and South America highlight a broader plan. Diversify trade so Canada isn't dependent on one unpredictable partner. The logic is straightforward. Europe wants Canadian liquefied natural gas and minerals for its green economy. South America is open to Canadian agriculture and technology. By spreading its trade ties, Canada reduces the risk of being held hostage to U.S. tariffs. Still, critics note the weakness. Most of these agreements are statements of intent without dollar values or immediate projects. That leaves Carney open to charges of all talk, no results. Diversification takes time, and time is not what anxious voters feel they have. Canada, however, is not without bargaining chips. Canadian natural gas is cleaner and more reliable than supplies from rivals like Russia. Nickel, cobalt, and other critical minerals are in high demand for electric vehicles and batteries. Canada can offer low-carbon aluminum and potash that many global markets depend on. And the North American auto industry is deeply integrated. A disruption in Canada would hit Detroit as well. These assets give Canada long-term leverage. But building export capacity, especially for LNG and minerals, takes years. Trump's tariffs are already in effect. That's the gap Carney must manage. Short-term concessions today versus long-term strength tomorrow. If Carney wants to justify his softer stance, Canadians will need clear results. At a minimum, a fair deal should roll back or reduce tariffs on steel and aluminum, provide lasting stability on softwood lumber, protect Canada's dairy industry from excessive demands, ensure auto and EV trade flows remain steady, and prevent new tariffs on essential goods like medicines and semiconductors. Ultimately, voters will judge this not by political spin, but by outcomes. Whether consumer prices stabilize, factories stay open, and Canadian exporters find predictable markets. So why hasn't Carney gone blow for blow with Trump? Because Trump thrives on unpredictability. He treats tariffs as bargaining chips, turning them on and off like switches. In that environment, escalation from Canada could spiral out of control. By lowering the temperature, Carney keeps dialogue open. And by building new ties in Europe and South America, he's trying to make sure Canada won't be cornered again. It's a balancing act. Accept some criticism at home now in exchange for more stability later. The gamble is political. Canadians remember the tough promises. If they don't soon see concrete deals, contracts signed, projects announced, the image of weakness may overshadow the logic of patience. Here's where things stand. Carney promised a fight, but so far has chosen restraint. Conservatives say he's already failed. Supporters say he's laying the groundwork for bigger wins. The truth is likely in between. Concessions today is the price of keeping negotiations alive tomorrow. The real test is coming. How long will Canadians wait for proof that this strategy works? And can Carney show that stepping back now will lead to stronger footing later? We asked whether Mark Carney's softer stance toward Donald Trump was a betrayal of promises or a calculated strategy. Now it's time to look at the real battleground, the sectors that matter most, and the scenarios Canada faces over the next year and a half. Because in the end, diplomacy is judged not by speeches, but by results. Tariffs lifted, contracts signed, and jobs protected. Let's go sector by sector. The first flashpoint is steel and aluminum. These industries employ thousands across Ontario and Quebec, and Canadian aluminum is among the cleanest in the world. Trump's tariffs hit directly at that edge, raising costs for factories on both sides of the border. Carney's priority is simple: win relief, or at least a stable agreement that gives Canadian producers certainty. Without that, layoffs loom, and the effects would spread to autos and construction. Next is softwood lumber, a dispute that has flared up for decades. The U.S. regularly accuses Canadian producers of unfair subsidies and slaps duties on their exports. Ottawa usually wins these cases in trade courts, but the cycle repeats. Carney needs something more durable this time. A multi-year agreement that sets clear rules. That would protect forestry towns in Canada and lower costs for American homebuilders. Then comes the auto and EV industry, the backbone of North American manufacturing. Parts cross the border multiple times before a car is finished. Tariffs here would disrupt both Detroit and Ontario. With the transition to electric vehicles underway, rules of origin and battery supply chains make the stakes even higher. Carney's task is to secure exemptions or predictable rules that keep Canada central in this ecosystem. For Canada, it's not just trade, it's the future of its industry. Agriculture and dairy is another sensitive front. Canada's supply management system has long been attacked by Trump as unfair. Carney cannot abandon it without devastating Canadian farmers, but he may have to allow small increases in import quotas in return for stability elsewhere. The challenge is to make limited concessions without unraveling the system. Energy is where Canada sees its biggest chance to build leverage. Europe is hungry for reliable alternatives to Russian gas. Canadian liquefied natural gas could fill that gap, cleaner and more secure than many competitors. The problem is timing. New export terminals take years to build. Carney can promise future supply, but unless projects are launched soon, it remains hypothetical. Concrete progress within the year will be vital if LNG is to become a bargaining chip rather than just a talking point. Two new risks are also on the horizon: pharmaceuticals and semiconductors. Trump has floated tariffs on both under the label of economic security. For Canada, that would be alarming. These industries are essential to healthcare and advanced manufacturing. Ottawa's task will be to secure exceptions and remind Washington that punishing Canadian producers ultimately hurts American consumers and supply chains too. Taken together, these industries form Canada's negotiation map. On one side are the concessions already made or considered: suspending the digital tax, easing counter tariffs, cooperating on enforcement, and signaling openness to LNG exports. On the other side are the demands: tariff relief on metals, a lasting lumber settlement, protection for dairy, and secure footing in autos and EVs. Critics say Carney has given too much without getting anything back. But the real measure will be whether today's concessions unlock concrete gains. If they do, he can argue the strategy worked. If not, the narrative of weakness will harden. So what might the next 12 to 18 months look like? 3 scenarios stand out. In the best case, Canada and the U.S. strike partial deals sector by sector: metals tariffs eased, lumber stabilized, autos exempted, and at least one LNG project moving ahead. That would reassure investors, protect jobs, and ease pressure on consumer prices. Carney could claim patience paid off. In the middle case, both sides settle into a fragile pause. Some tariffs are capped, talks continue, but no full settlement is reached. Markets remain uneasy, but trade flows survive. This would mirror Trump's style: always negotiating, rarely closing. For Carney, it means constant pressure but space to buy time. In the worst case, escalation resumes. Trump imposes new tariffs on autos or pharmaceuticals, Canada retaliates, and costs climb. Inflation ticks up, exporters scramble, and the diversification push toward Europe and South America becomes urgent. But those new ties will not be enough to cushion the short-term blow. How will Canadians know which path is unfolding? The indicators are clear. Watch for new investments in auto plants or smelters. That signals confidence. Track trade volumes in lumber, dairy, and metals. See whether LNG projects finally break ground, and look at consumer prices for cars and building materials. If they rise, tariffs are still biting. Beyond economics lies politics. The Conservatives will frame every concession as weakness. To counter that, Carney must show proof. Even one signed lumber deal or a visible LNG project could shift the narrative from weakness to strategy. The danger is that infrastructure takes years while political patience is short. That's why visible wins are essential in the coming months. So what should Canada do now? The answer is balance. Negotiate industry by industry, announce timelines the public can follow, support sectors hit hardest, and keep building new markets abroad. Most importantly, explain clearly what Canada is giving, what it expects in return, and why escalation would be worse. Because this debate is about more than tariffs. It's about credibility. Carney promised confrontation but chose restraint. Whether history sees that as weakness or wisdom depends on what Canada secures in the months ahead. For now, one thing is certain. Trump has set the tempo. Canada must decide whether to follow it, resist it, or find a way to rewrite it. The next 18 months will decide which path Carney takes and whether Canadians believe it was worth the price.